Starting this year, I am thrilled. Madeline Borkin and I got introduced, and I think our first phone call was supposed to be maybe a half an hour. It was like an hour and a half later. We were both like, "We have work to do. We like, we gotta let's schedule another time to chat." And I immediately invited you to be on this series, Madeline, because I love what you're up to. Introduce yourself, the work that you're doing, and then we're going to dig in on, I think, an incredibly timely topic right now.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me. And it was truly a delight when I met you. So my name is Madeline Borkin. I work for the Institute for Corporate Productivity. I am the Vice President of Membership Development, as well as the executive sponsor for our Chief Diversity Officer Board. Our organization is a peer research organization, and what we do is we study the people practices that drive high performance for organizations. And so how we're defining high performance is just really looking at those organizations that have consistently outperformed their competitors over a 5-year period of time in revenue, market share, profitability, and customer sat, and really saying, what are high performance organizations doing differently than low performance organization?
Go through those measures again, because I love that's really holistic in terms of what you're considering high performance.
Sure. So what we do is we're really looking at those people practices that high performance organizations are doing differently than performance organization, and defining it very clearly as those organizations, high performance organizations, those organizations that have consistently outperformed their competitors over a 5-year period of time in revenue, market share, profitability, and customer satisfaction.
All right, y'all, there's your business case for what we're about to talk about.
Well,
not that we should still be having to talk about the business case, but here we are, right? So, and by the way, I feel like we should note this. We did before the camera started that Madeline and I also showed up twinning today in our outfit choices. Okay, so what are you seeing? What is the data telling us? What are those practices that you're seeing are sort of these next practices for DEI?
Sure. So one thing that I do want to call out is, as we're thinking about what high performance organizations are doing, when we say next practices, we're actually calling out what those high performance organizations are doing, but not very many of them are doing it. And so, yes, it's really, really neat.
The cutting edge of the best practice of the high performance. Awesome. So we're seeing the really innovative organizations, what they're doing, how they're moving forward. Cool.
How they're thinking about it. Exactly.
We're psyched to have this conversation.
I'm
all about being on the edge, right? And
but it's real. What's fun about it is that to just hear things like, we know employee resource groups and business resource groups are just a phenomenal way to make a huge impact within your organization. But think about, as a next practice, paying your ERG leaders or BRG leaders. These are some of the things that high performance organizations are really thinking about.
Are they also, I'm curious, because I actually just did some work with a large organization talking about how they were positioning their ERG leaders for leadership pipeline. Are they, so it's pay, but are they also embedding that in succession planning?
Yes, in fact, one of the studies that we unveiled, I think it was 2019, was called ERG Leaders for Development. And so really looking at your high potential development and thinking about, how do we leverage the folks that are participating, right? So you think about it from a leader perspective, the executive sponsor, how do we leverage high potentials for those roles in particular, and especially to build cultural competency. And if you identify people who don't self-identify with that particular group or ERG or business resource group, that's one way of developing them is to give them exposure, have them lead this group. Another thing that was really, really neat is all the other folks that are volunteering for the employee resource groups or business resource groups. And if you think about it, they're learning everything from how to establish a business plan to how to put together a budget statement to what's going to make the biggest impact out there.
Yeah. It's interesting, Madeline, because I used to, before the real rise of resource groups, I used to say, take some people that are underrepresented group, high potential, and have them go work in a nonprofit.
Yeah.
In an area that maybe they come out of marketing, have them sit on that finance committee
Yep.
of a nonprofit. Well, now you can do that internally, right?
You can.
Right.
Especially if you leverage ERGs as true business resource groups.
Yep.
And give them the problems of the company to solve.
Yes.
Whatever that is. Is it product development? Is it marketing? Is it finance? I mean, there are so many different ways that you could upskill that population,
yep.
But through experiences that are going to make a huge impact to the organization.
And I want to give a shout out and amplify the work that Jason Patria is doing around this. He's doing super cool work and really meaningful, high impact work with business resource groups in organizations. So check him out and the work that he's doing. And Jason, I'll give you a little shout out in the comments when we're done here too. It's such a ready-made built-in, and I love hearing that the data proves that out too, right?
Yes.
That it's not just we think this is, but you're really seeing that. So they're paying these folks, they're embedding it in succession, they're giving them real business problems to solve.
Yep.
Okay, cool.
One of my favorite stories was it was Fifth Third Bank, and they had a business resource group. It was their LGBTQAI group, and I think that group was specifically in Tennessee. And what they did is they were very strategic with their approach. So when they attended an event in the community, they would send talent acquisition, some private bankers, and so forth. And within 1 year, they realized a huge ROI in not only their applicant pipeline and candidate pipeline, but as well in the private banking, new customers, increase in revenue and so forth, attributed specifically to that group.
Okay, so everybody take a look. How are you, are you calling them employee resource groups? Are you calling them business resource groups? How are you leveraging? How are you paying these folks? Are you seeing what a business driver? And not only that, it's really in keeping this key talent engaged.
Yeah.
I mean, if you just think about that from an ROI standpoint, like this is a place where I feel like I'm included, I belong, I've got a voice, I'm able to do this work. I see an opportunity because what I'm doing in this BRG is amplified. So very cool. Awesome.
And in 2020, ERGs or BRGs were probably the #1 resource that organizations leveraged to really address all of what was happening in 2020.
Absolutely.
So just imagine the impact that these groups can help you to identify, everything from employees that feel isolated.
Yep.
Employees that are just dealing with a lot of emotional and personal issues. Parents that had to suddenly become teachers to after the George Floyd murder and consecutive things that were happening as well. And then during the political challenges in our world. So
I will say I don't think anybody came through 2020 unscathed.
Mm-hmm.
And the BRGs really being that steady pulse. That's cool hearing that. Again, I love, there are things that we intuitively know and believe to be true. I love that now it's like, yes, actually the data tells us that too.
Yes, exactly. Yep.
Awesome. What are some other next practices?
One that I'm a huge fan of, and in particular because we just started to develop tools around this as part of what we were hearing in the research, and that is bias audit checklists or processes. Doing a bias audit on all of your processes, from talent acquisition to succession management to total rewards, performance management. Today, I think we released the artificial intelligence, how to build or do an audit of bias in all of those processes.
That's
really,
we like all through the talent cycle then, right? And really looking at and is that audit, are there even best practices around the audit itself, or is it just the practice
yes.
of doing it?
Really what you're thinking about is literally a checklist. Am I doing the right things?
Yep.
Am I really thinking through each of these processes in a way that is inclusive? And that's really what we're trying to answer there.
Yeah, we talk about you have to hack your bias brain and you have to hack your systems, right? Because it's not a
Yep.
question of is bias there, it's are we interrupting it?
Right.
So, things like are all interviews held in the same location, same set of criteria, same questions, all of those things going through. And we'd say sometimes these things are simple but not easy.
And with bias being a part of who most people are in terms of especially implicit bias, there's a lot going on there that if we don't put ourselves in check.
Have you seen, Madeline, I'm curious, like who do you, this is where I'm going total nuts and bolts on you. Do you have anything in terms of that audit itself as a checklist, but is that a team lead doing that? Is that multiple people? Because I even think having multiple perspectives doing your audit would help you see things that you wouldn't be able to see.
I agree. When you think about doing a bias audit, it should be a team of folks, right, that are responsible for whatever the initiative is or the function might be. So if you're thinking about talent acquisition, why, we should probably have multiple eyes on that and multiple ways to address where there might be some bias. Let's bring in all the different ideas and the unique ideas. So I wouldn't say that it would be one person necessarily. I just think that depending on what that function is or that process might be, inviting others to the table to provide ideas. And maybe this is another way to leverage ERGs and BRGs.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Awesome. It's so funny because I have these conversations, Madeline, and then my brain starts like getting implementation. What are some other things that are happening?
So I literally just got off of a phone call with Rob Cross, who's a pioneer in organizational network analysis. And when I think about networks, having diverse networks within the organization, when you first join an organization, do you have the right networks? And then once you have joined the organization, do you have the right networks to get up to speed faster, right? That's one of the things. But now, if I'm a diverse candidate or individual employee entering into the organization, do I have the right networks now to advance? Right? So you have the time to full productivity, but then thinking about how diverse are my networks to advance? How am I going to get that sponsor that's going to help me move throughout this organization? Right? And those are the things that we should enable as companies. We should be responsible for helping people in our company have those networks.
Particularly people from underrepresented groups.
Exactly.
They're coming in at a disadvantage, likely, for those networks, right? Because of all the unconscious bias and likely bias and natural networks. Oh, that is fascinating.
That I think for me is like one of my most
That's a huge
favorite
call.
next practices. If organizations aren't thinking about really understanding the networks that are happening in the organization, it's always going to be challenging. It's going to be difficult to identify diverse talent and where they could be moved throughout the organization. And of course, you're going to have a retention issue. I think the second part of that is collaborative overload, well-being, helping individuals to minimize that overload and be more effective. So it just addresses so many different issues. And I think that is a next practice that if organizations aren't embracing it, they're going to miss the mark.
What's interesting about that is with the organization that I just worked with, we talked about influence mapping and
that's yeah.
So we talked about influence mapping, and we talked about understanding the role of a sponsor, because my gosh, Madeline, I don't know about you, but when I started my career, I had no idea. No idea, right? And we know all the stats about why people from underrepresented groups don't have sponsors. So now, like, literally, it is my soapbox. Every single person starting their career, I'm like, hey, here's this critical role. Here's how you position yourself. It's like pull a string on my back, and I'm going to talk about sponsorship. But what I love about this, and we talk about in our programs about for people that are in a position to sponsor somebody not like them.
Yep.
But this gets intentional right from the start about understanding those power networks and those.
Yes.
Oh, that's cool.
And really helps people to thrive, help you identify your energizer. So if you know who your energizers are and you connect that new employee to the energizer, imagine the influence that can go throughout the organization. And just you have your connectors that aren't necessarily energizers. And so there's just a lot of different ways, but to have that available will just help you to be more effective in terms of moving that diverse talent throughout the organization.
Yeah, mind blown.
And helping themselves. They can help themselves as well, right?
Yeah, that's always a reciprocal.
Right. But if I don't create a space or a way of doing it, and if I don't understand as the organization how to do it, then how can I help?
Oh, that's phenomenal. And I think it's that's chopping down so many barriers, like with that one thing. Ooh, that is cool. Yeah, my mind is blown on that one, because we've talked about it from the bottom up, and even just individuals understanding, but right from the start, access to networks. Oh, great.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
It's going to be a good conversation.
I know.
I'm going to keep asking what's next until you're like, isn't that enough?
Well, and there's just so much going on. And we did a talent predictions and priorities report for 2021 to determine across the different functions, from a CHRO to a head of talent, head of learning, chief diversity officers, talent acquisition, total rewards, and people analytics. And in asking what their priorities are, it was very clear that DE&I was at the top of the list for all roles.
What's interesting, Madeline, is that just keeps coming up again and again. I think that every survey that's been done, DEI is in a top 3.
Yeah. And how do we move, though, from rhetoric to action, right? So that's the thing that we're all trying to figure out. How do we get to action?
It's that we have a bias, right? This is everyday inclusion. We have a bias for action here. So that piece is so important, and not make the mistakes that we've made in the past. Yeah. Where we're putting where we put a focus on one group of people at the expense of others, or focusing only on, and again, you and I chatted about this. We're seeing so much focus on diversity hiring and
Yep.
then forgetting the rest of
Getting-
the,
Exactly.
right. So all these things
Exactly.
that you're talking about in terms of the business resource groups, the networking, the the networks, that piece of it, that starts to get to that. Okay, you spent all that money on finding these people.
Mhm.
What are you doing to actually create environments where they thrive?
Right. Right. That's exactly it. Yeah. And just when I think about action in general, it really is going to be about accountability. And so once we've determined what are those actions that we're going to take, then how are we going to be accountable for them?
Yep.
And I do feel that a lot of organizations do call out some of their commitments and some of their actions that they plan to take, but then and I think that now and moving forward, I don't think I know, we're going to be required to measure and be more transparent and share the data
Yeah, absolutely.
widely. Whether you're private or in the public sector, it doesn't matter. The boards are asking for it.
Well, and not only are boards asking for it, uh, employees are asking for it, and customers
Oh,
are
yeah,
asking for it. And I mean,
right.
it is literally from every side. There is pressure, which I'm thrilled about, quite frankly.
Mhm. Yeah,
And
yeah,
it does mean that there's going to have to be a letting go, though, of systems, practices, and anchoring a lot of this in change management.
mhm,
Understanding why people are resisting a new way of interviewing, a new way of, that we should
mhm.
pay our BRG leaders. Well, why should I do that? My budget, da da da. Right, being able to walk people very tangibly through that change cycle, because I think we forget that this is about behavior
Mhm.
change, and behavior change is hard.
Right. It is really hard. Um, and on that specific point, that's one of the or one of the practices highlighted, especially by CDOs, is really looking at DE&I governance. And so then really just trying to understand restructure,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
But restructure through the lens of the entire organization, supplier diversity, marketplace. I mean, just across the board versus thinking about it as, oh, it's the Office of D&I that we need to restructure, or we need a new DE&I strategy. It's like, okay, let's really think about it through all these lenses and ensure that it's woven.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
It is a part of the fabric of every single thing that you do when you're
Right.
getting this right.
Right.
And
On a
the
program.
right, yeah, because that will never, right. If you're looking at it as
Right.
programmatic, or if you're looking at it, okay, now we're going to send everybody through training,
Yep.
or you're missing the boat there. Okay, so what else? Anything else? Because we just covered.
I'm just trying to think. Wait, I'm actually going to look at something to see. Let's see here. The metrics and accountability, just going back to really tracking, and what are you tracking and what are you planning to disclose. I think from a broader culture perspective, what type of a listening strategy do you have in place? What is that listening strategy? What are you doing to ensure that it isn't only about that employee engagement
Yeah, we talk about engagement and
survey?
inclusion. Well, right, engagement and inclusion are different, right? If
Right,
you're
right.
measuring engagement, and if you're not looking at intersectionality in that, right, in some of the
Mhm.
demographics, your engagement numbers might look great because you've
Right.
got majority dominant group, right? And so that's showing up in your engagement numbers, but slice and dice that. I think the other is, there are those vanity measures that people want to go to right away,
Right.
versus that a holistic look. And what are your trends? And what are different underrepresented groups telling you about what it
Mhm.
is like to work? One of the things, too, going back to BRGs, how are you listening? Boy, that's a mechanism for listening, right?
Oh, yes.
To have some of these listening sessions within those groups, right,
Mhm.
where executive can really hear the voice of, and take that back to the business.
Yep. And that I think that's going to be the absolute because then I think you can be more laser focused on what's most important and not make assumptions. And so having that listening strategy where you're asking questions regularly, even if it's one question a day, or even if you're, managing it through a platform, a learning platform,
Right.
however you choose to do that, we do need to deploy that on a regular basis in a variety of ways.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Wow, wow, wow. I'm still my brain keeps coming back to the networking access and the network access piece and how companies can really dig in on that. But we
Yeah.
covered so much. Leave me with one last truth bomb.
Oh my gosh. For me, it's going to be all about action, right? It's what can I do? What can I enable my organization to do to really take action and get away from just talking about it
Yeah.
and really moving the needle and being that responsible person. So for me, I want to be as responsible as I can for my organization, my community, and as a mom.
Yeah.
So
I love that. It's like do the next right thing. And the next right thing and stay in action and stay in motion and ask yourself the question, what did I do today and what can I do tomorrow? I think that keeps us in action, in motion, moving forward.
it
So,
really does. It really does.
Madeline, thank you so much. This was so great.
Thank you. I so enjoyed this. So much
And,
fun.
um, more to come. I think that you and I are going to have another one of these
Yeah.
6 months from now. Thanks, y'all.
Thank
We will
you.
see you next week.
Okay. Have a great day.